Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm joined by Seth Mandel, senior editor for Commentary Magazine, regular contributor to the Commentary Pod. You were not on this morning, Seth. Do you take Thursdays off? Is that part of the rotation?
Often, yes.
All right. So I want to ask you a big and difficult question. I'm not a Jew. I'm a big supporter of Israel. They are our greatest and most important strategic ally. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess tonight, with protesters in the street, the Shin Bet guy accusing Netanyahu of firing him because of the Qatar Gate money going on. The president of Israel, Herzog, is not supposed to be involved in politics, and he's involved in politics. There are 22 hostages held in the horrible dungeons of Hamas. How are you feeling as a Jewish American about Israel today?
It is a tough question because there's so much going on. I mean, in general, I think that they know what they're doing in terms of the war, in terms of restarting operations in Gaza, and in terms of putting pressure on Hamas and not letting Hamas control the process anymore. And domestically, it's hard because we don't know what they know or what investigators think they know about Qatar's involvement, but we do know that that Prime Minister Netanyahu has consistently been told by the Israeli Attorney General that he can't fire so-and-so, he can't fire this person, he can't do that. And so sometimes it seems like the Attorney General is the president, is the Prime Minister of Israel. I mean, Israelis, they grow up dreaming of being the prime minister, and prime ministers grow up dreaming of being the attorney general, I guess. It's hard
Can I pause there?
Yeah.
I don't do other people's politics. I don't comment on which party ought to run it. It's not my country. But I do constitutional law, and I got to tell you, she's crazy. I mean, she arrogates to herself authorities that no other attorney general that I've ever read of in any parliamentary system would dare assert. Does she strike you as being ego-driven, power-hungry, and out of control?
She strikes me as being in a position that is not very limited in terms of power because Israel doesn't have a written constitution. It does have basic laws. It does have documents, founding documents and things like that, but it doesn't have a constitution the way we and other even parliamentary democracies often do. And so it's just sort of a power that's accrued over time. Norms have a way of staying in motion, like an object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an outside force, right? That law of physics. That's kind of how it is in places that don't have a clear set written constitution.
Well, you just used a word. Everything that I assumed that was a norm about Israel is dissolving in front of me. For example, I don't know if you listened to Dan Senor's emergency podcast, Call Me Back, yesterday. He had on Meet Segal and Nadav Eyal, and they basically yelled past each other for an hour. Did you listen to that yesterday?
I didn't listen to that episode, no, but I do listen, and the show's great.
Well, they were yelling at each other, and I mean, it was really as though the norm. I'm used to my Jewish friends arguing vehemently about everything. But I am not used to a nation at war with an existential threat and with the body politic falling apart with all these. It's very unsettling, is what I'm trying to say. Do you feel unsettled about Israel right now?
I feel, well, not as much as when the judicial reform protests were going on, because that was a purely domestic issue, and the country seemed to be tearing itself apart over it in ways it never had before. I hadn't seen Israel do that to itself. That was extremely unsettling. And so what's happening now is, to me, seems like a smaller version of that, and also, I guess, less unexpected. And there's still a sense in the country, because they're at war, there's still a sense of unity, of purpose, in a way that there wasn't before the war, when it was just the judicial reform protests and people said you're tearing your country apart over who gets to appoint judges, isn't this kind of late in the game for a democracy to figure this stuff out? So I'm less unsettled, honestly, now because there's so many important things happening that that Trump judicial selection, in a way, I heard somebody once say that the reason that the rate of nut allergies are so low in Israel is because Israelis already have too many nuts to worry about.
Well,
So, they have
I'll add
these
to
real
that.
problems, these existential problems.
The traumatic event of the country's history, at least since 1973 and probably since its founding, occurred on 10/7. So I would expect mass post-traumatic stress to manifest itself in a lot of different ways across the entire country. But they've won decisive victory after decisive victory in Lebanon and Syria, against Iran, against Hamas, and now you've got the president getting in. I'm wondering if Humpty Dumpty's broken. Do you get any worry that there's another generation coming up that's going to be better than the generation right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that every generation is shaped by its peers in Israel in terms of politics. And that's what's happening now, which is that Bibi Netanyahu, as prime minister, if you look around the political world in Israel, many of his rivals once worked for him. Naftali Bennett, Avigdor Lieberman, and some of these others, some who have joined his coalitions have been against him in the past. He has dominated the Israeli political scene at a national level for an unusually long period of time for a democracy. I can only think of Angela Merkel really in the current,
And she's not even close. She's probably 2/3 as long as he.
Right. So, I think it's just, and then again, the left in Israel kind of dissolved after the failure of the Oslo process, and after Ehud Barak was voted out by Ariel Sharon. And so it ended up being the Israeli right splitting up the spoils of victory in a way. And so they are very similar to each other on policy. And so what you tend to see are personality fights. And I think that that's what is so unsettling from the outside, is that they don't have a lot to argue about. So they argue personalities, because on policy debates, there's not that much to debate about in terms of the political consensus. And that
Now,
makes
I'm going to ask you to stay through the break and
prettier than
talk to me. And I'll set this up so you can think about this and then give me the answer during the break. Secretary Rubio was my guest yesterday. He basically said Donald Trump doesn't talk through his hat. He told Iran what he was going to do if they kept doing this. And he is serious about what he said. I went back and reread the transcript. I've listened to the interview again. Secretary Rubio was saying Donald Trump is going to hit Iran unless this stuff stops from the Houthis. And I think that's true. And I'm wondering, do you think Israel is going to participate in that? And do you want them to participate in that? And is it possible that after all this stress that the Middle East will be remade? Don't answer that, Seth. I'm going to come right back to you after we pipe out the music and tell our stations. We'll be right back in 2 minutes down the road. Seth Mandel is my guest. You ought to listen to the Commentary Podcast. It starts every morning with me. Every morning I listen to the Commentary Podcast. Heavy Troy was in today. They got new good merch, including It's Worse Than That, which I think I actually copyrighted before you guys did. I heard Abe say it so often, but don't go anywhere. Back with Seth Mandel. Seth, do you think Donald Trump will do it?
I don't know if I can say yes or no, but I would be surprised if it doesn't happen. I really think that the skies over Iran are, as Jonathan Chanzer of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies always says when he comes on our podcast, the skies over Iran are naked. And so it's an opportunity with very low risk to take out a real threat and to really end a conflict. I mean, you have to understand that because Iran has no real air defenses, not anything that can stop the U.S. government, there isn't really anything they can do after that in retaliation, but what they've been doing for 3 decades. So anybody who's worried about blowback from taking out the Iranian nuclear program, nothing is really going to change. They've been trying to commit terrorism against the United States and the West for decades. This would just ensure that they can't do it underneath a nuclear umbrella. So to me, as an odds maker, I think Trump looks at that on paper and says, that's it's just asking to be done, and it'll be my legacy. And in fact, it's so attractive to presidents to have a kind of conflict ending legacy that there were whispers that Biden was even considering doing it at the end of his presidency because he didn't care anymore what Democrats thought, right, after he'd been pushed out. But the legacy idea, you can be the one who finished off Iran's nuclear program, and it won't require a ground invasion, and whatever happens politically, domestically after that, there would probably be moves against the Muslims, and nobody would say, hey, the CIA is the one doing that, because we would have weakened them, and even the playing field, and letting the pro-democracy citizens of Iran have a fair shot at running their own country. And so I think you would just, when you describe the pros and cons of this and how low the risks are, I think it looks like a kind of legacy project. And Trump, he doesn't have a second term after this. This is his second term. So I would put the chances that it happens at greater than 50%. But I can't say it'll definitely happen because I never know from day to day what Donald Trump is actually thinking.
Well, I never attribute thoughts, motives to anyone I don't know very, very well. And I interviewed him enough, and I know what he said. But I do think if he was the person to finally do, after 25 years of threats, what American presidents back to George W. Bush have said, destroy the facilities. And it might take 96 hours of carpet bombing of the mountain things, but I think they could get it done. And I would like Israeli planes to go along with it. Would that bring some domestic... I'm out of time, Seth, but I just want to thank you for the extra time. Thank you for joining me today. Say hello to Bethany. Tell her there's a court case I'm waiting to talk to her about because it's going to drive her crazy. All right. Bye-bye.